She steps into the room, soft eyes, a gentle smile, radiating warmth and kindness. Everything about her feels harmless, inviting even, but Carl Jung, the man who mapped the darkest realms of the human mind, saw something different. He believed that behind a certain kind of feminine grace lies a silent, powerful force. It doesn't shout or rage, it seduces. It waits patiently, hidden beneath the surface, until the perfect moment to strike, not with violence, but with subtle control, manipulation, and a terrifying kind of invisibility. Jung called this the shadow, the part of ourselves we deny or hide from. But in women, he believed this shadow often wears the most disarming mask of all: innocence. When innocence becomes a mask, it transforms into a weapon. This wasn't a theory. Jung shouted from the rooftops. No, he wrote about it quietly, in private journals, in hushed lectures, and through cryptic, careful language. Because he understood that this truth was dangerous. Society would reject it, academia would bury it, and the world simply wasn't ready to face it. But here's the uncomfortable reality. The women Jung feared the most were not the loud, aggressive, or overtly cruel. They were polished, poised, kind, perfectly composed. Yet behind their serene facades, they held the power to destroy reputations, unravel psyches, and ruin lives, all without ever raising their voice. Could it be that the most dangerous woman is the one no one suspects? Jung certainly thought so. If what he revealed is true, then much of what we believe about feminine nature is a carefully crafted illusion. In this video, we're diving deep into Carl Jung's most unsettling ideas about women, not the softened, popularized versions, but the raw truths he kept hidden for those brave enough to look beneath the surface. Because once you see what he saw, you can never unsee it. Why do some people wield incredible power not through force or wealth, but simply through the way they present themselves? Why do qualities like innocence, softness, or vulnerability often mask a form of invisible control? What if this isn't accidental? What if it's archetypal, embedded deep within the collective human psyche? Carl Jung, one of psychology's greatest minds, argued that what we perceive on the surface is rarely the whole truth, especially when it comes to human nature, and even more so when it comes to the feminine psyche. Jung warned us, appearances deceive. What looks harmless may conceal unimaginable power. What seems pure might actually be the most dangerous thing of all. In a culture obsessed with transparency and political correctness, many of Jung's sharpest insights have been buried, ignored, or softened, locked away in private notebooks, far from public debate. But today, we're opening that box. We're going to explore what Jung really believed about the complex layers of female nature, not just the shadow itself, but the intricate psychological games played beneath the surface of charm, passivity, and allure. This isn't about blaming or demonizing anyone. It's about waking up, understanding that power wears many faces, and sometimes, the gentlest ones hide the sharpest edges. Because only when we confront these hidden truths can we truly understand the depths of human nature, and perhaps see the world a little clearer. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious governs much of our lives, unless we learn to recognize it. The female psyche, like the male, harbors a dark side, one that society often romanticizes or refuses to confront. Innocence can be a mask, empathy, a tool. Behind the sweetest smile may hide a predator not driven by cruelty, but by instinct. In this video, we'll unravel how Jung decoded this paradox, how he unveiled the archetype of the innocent predator. You'll explore the psychology behind female influence, the hidden power of projection, and why men frequently fall prey to their own illusions. More importantly, you'll gain the insight to see beneath the surface, decoding the silent rules of attraction, manipulation, and unconscious control. Carl Jung didn't seek to ignite a gender war. His goal was individuation, awakening people to the shadow they unknowingly dance with. And that awakening begins here. Across nearly every culture and throughout history, the ideal woman has been painted with the same brush: soft, gentle, caring, the embodiment of innocence. She's praised not for her strength, but for her passivity, not for her actions, but for how she appears. This image of the innocent, harmless woman is more than a social expectation. According to Jung, it's a mask, a carefully constructed persona shaped by societal pressures eventually absorbed so deeply it becomes indistinguishable from the self. Jung explained the persona as the identity we wear to navigate society, a psychological mask designed for acceptance. Men often don masks of strength, confidence, or stoicism. Women, however, are conditioned toward a different disguise: innocence. This isn't merely about appearing good, it's about appearing non-threatening, agreeable, even naive. But here's the danger: the more society rewards this mask, the more it becomes deliberate strategy. For centuries, women who appeared pure, vulnerable, and dependent were praised and protected. Yet Jung noticed something far deeper beneath this reward system: a subconscious use of these traits, not just to fit in, but to influence. The more harmless someone seems, the more others lower their guard. And that's where true power begins. This isn't about deception, it's about adaptation. In societies where direct dominance is discouraged or punished, subtle control becomes a form of survival. Jung observed how women, often excluded from open power in patriarchal systems, developed a different kind of influence, one rooted in charm, emotional sensitivity, and the ability to shape others' perceptions without overt effort. The power wasn't in what they said, it was in what they provoked. It was in how others reacted to their image. Think of the iconic femme fatale not as a mere Hollywood stereotype, but as a psychological truth. She never threatens. She never demands. She simply exists in a way that pulls people in, disarms them, and compels action on her behalf. Her innocence isn't always genuine. It's often weaponized. And even when it is genuine, it holds an unspoken power, a magnetism that shapes reality without force. Jung's insight reveals that the shadow isn't just about darkness and destruction. Sometimes, it's quiet, subtle. It operates beneath smiles and soft tones, guiding behavior through unseen influence. Understanding this archetype allows us to see beyond surface appearances, to grasp the complex dynamics of power, vulnerability, and control hidden in plain sight. In a world eager to simplify gender roles and mask uncomfortable truths, Jung's ideas challenge us to embrace complexity, to recognize that power isn't always loud or visible. Sometimes it's nestled in innocence, waiting patiently to shift the game. This knowledge isn't about casting blame, it's about awareness, about seeing the full picture of human nature, shadows and all. Because only when we recognize the masks we wear, and those worn by others, can we truly understand the forces shaping our relationships and ourselves. And with that understanding comes the power to navigate the invisible currents that influence us all. The delicate balance between innocence and shadow fascinated Jung deeply. He noticed that beneath the guise of purity often lurked a dormant darkness, waiting patiently to surface when circumstances demanded it. This transformation is subtle. A smile shifts into a calculated tool, tears become a strategy, and silence morphs into a silent form of control. The boundary between genuine vulnerability and covert manipulation blurs so easily, it's almost impossible to detect. We witness this in everyday life. A quietly spoken woman might skillfully steer conversations to her benefit. A seemingly fragile demeanor can evoke intense loyalty or fierce protectiveness from others. A soft voice might veil a potent psychological grip. These behaviors aren't rare exceptions. They are ingrained social codes, passed down unconsciously through generations. Jung's insight was revolutionary. Innocence isn't always innocent. It can act as a mirror, inviting others to project their desires and fantasies onto the woman behind the mask. Men, for example, project ideals of purity, beauty, and safety onto her, blinding themselves to the layers beneath. Interestingly, the woman herself may be unaware she wields this subtle power. It isn't always a conscious act. It's archetypal, woven into the collective unconscious. But here lies the danger. When a person fully believes in their own mask, when a woman identifies wholly with the role of the innocent, her true self, with all its complexities, emotions, and desires, becomes buried. This repression never stays silent forever. What is hidden always finds a way to resurface, often violently and without warning. Jung warned us about this psychological battlefield. The persona, the mask we wear, is not evil. It is essential for social functioning. However, when it dominates too much, it distorts reality, both for the wearer and those around them. Next, we'll explore another cornerstone of Jung's thought, the anima, the symbolic feminine within every individual's psyche, and how this inner image shapes not only women, but also men's perception of femininity, sometimes leading to devastating consequences. To truly grasp the enigmatic power of the feminine, not just in women, but in every man's psyche, Jung introduced one of his most profound concepts, the anima. In Jungian psychology, the anima represents the unconscious feminine aspect of a man's mind. She isn't a literal person but an internal symbol, formed through cultural narratives, collective myths, and deeply personal projections. This inner figure has immense influence over how men feel, love, and suffer, often without their awareness. For Jung, the anima isn't an abstract idea. She wields raw, emotional, irrational, and seductive power. When a man encounters a woman who resonates, even faintly, with his unconscious ideal of femininity, his anima stirs. But instead of clarity or understanding, this encounter often clouds perception, leading to what Jung termed the projection trap. In the projection trap, a man projects his anima onto a real woman, seeing not who she truly is, but a reflection of his own psychic fantasy. He perceives purity where complexity exists, grace where calculation might lurk, and vulnerability where there may be strength. This projection blinds him, distorting reality and often resulting in disappointment or heartbreak. The anima's power explains why men sometimes fall deeply for a woman who doesn't live up to their ideal, because they are not truly in love with her. They are in love with an internal image shaped by unconscious desires and fears. Understanding this dynamic offers crucial insight into the nature of attraction, influence, and illusion. It reveals how the feminine archetype operates, not just externally, but within the hidden chambers of the male psyche. Jung's work challenges us to confront these unconscious forces, to see the masks and projections we carry, and to awaken from illusions that control us. Only by becoming aware of these shadows can we start to live more authentic, balanced lives free from the unconscious traps of innocence and projection. This journey is difficult but necessary. It's about embracing the full spectrum of human nature, acknowledging the light and the shadow, the mask and the truth beneath it. And in doing so, we find the possibility for deeper connection, understanding, and transformation. A man doesn't fall in love with the real woman before him. Instead, he falls for the ideal he has projected onto her. This projection makes him vulnerable, blind to the reality beneath the fantasy. Jung believed this wasn't a rare occurrence. It's universal. The anima, or what he called the inner feminine, isn't just poetic symbolism. It's a powerful psychic force that pulls men into relationships, emotions, and choices they barely understand. It bypasses logic, ignoring red flags, and casts a spell where the woman becomes almost divine, larger than life. But here's the twist. Real women often sense this projection. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. Some feel trapped, suffocated by the pressure to live up to a fantasy they never asked for. Others learn to work with it, even harness it. When a woman realizes she's being idealized, she faces a choice. She can shatter the illusion, revealing her imperfect, authentic self, or she can lean into it, using the power that comes from being the object of someone's ideal. This isn't the manipulative villainy you see in movies. It's far subtler, psychological. It's the moment a woman discovers that a certain look, a tone of voice, or an air of vulnerability can unlock something deep inside a man. Once triggered, that man begins to serve the fantasy she embodies, not the real person standing before him. Jung saw this dynamic playing out not only in intimate relationships but also in society at large. The female image is often lifted up in the male unconscious muse. Angel, goddess. These aren't just roles. They are projections that blur the lines of reality. Men see what they want to see, not who is actually there. And this is where danger creeps in. When a man becomes consumed by his anima projection, he loses touch with his center. Logic fades. He becomes emotionally possessed, driven by a force beyond reason. Women, especially those who understand this dynamic, can wield this influence not out of cruelty, but often out of necessity. In a world where direct power is historically denied to them, psychological influence becomes their weapon. Jung didn't blame women for this. He blamed unconsciousness. The refusal to recognize and integrate the anima leads to imbalance. The anima isn't evil, but when left unexamined, she controls a man from the shadows, and when women knowingly reflect that inner image back to him, reality and illusion blur into one. This dynamic unfolds quietly in many relationships. The man grows obsessed, The woman grows distant, he idealizes her more. She withdraws further, he chases, she controls, not because of a battle for dominance, but because he isn't truly connecting with her, he's relating to his own inner fantasy. Here's the harsh truth. Projection fuels manipulation, not because the woman is inherently manipulative, but because she becomes a mirror reflecting a man's deepest fantasies. If she chooses, she can become that fantasy long enough to gain his devotion, protection, or influence. But beneath the surface, neither truly knows the other. Both are trapped in an ancient archetypal dance. For Jung, the only escape from this cycle was through individuation, the painful, sometimes agonizing process of self-discovery and integration. It's about breaking free from unconscious roles, shedding projections, and embracing the whole, messy truth of who we are. Individuation demands courage. It means seeing the shadow in ourselves and others, accepting complexity instead of neat masks. Only then can we begin to form genuine connections, not fantasies, but relationships grounded in reality and mutual understanding. This journey isn't easy, but it's the path to freedom from illusion, the key to seeing beyond the masks we all wear. Because in the end, true love isn't about projecting ideals, it's about embracing reality, with all its flaws and contradictions. The journey to reclaiming projection begins with seeing the woman as she truly is: complex, flawed, real, and confronting the shadow within one's own psyche. Only then can a man break free from the spell of the anima, and start to love not an idea, but a person. This part of Jung's theory often gets lost behind his more famous concepts, yet it strikes at the core of modern relationships. It reveals that the most powerful chains are invisible. They aren't imposed by others, they're created and projected by ourselves onto those we love. In the next section, we'll dive even deeper into what Jung called the dark feminine, the shadow lurking behind charm and allure. He saw this shadow as both a threat and a necessary step toward psychological wholeness. Beneath every carefully crafted persona, Jung believed, lies a shadow, a hidden part of the psyche, holding everything we repress, deny, or refuse to face. While many think of this shadow as personal flaws or darkness, Jung's insight went further. He recognized that the feminine psyche, like the masculine, contains a shadow, and when left unconscious, it can become dangerous. This isn't about demonizing women, it's about understanding the subtle psychological forces shaping human behavior. Just as men struggle with inner shadows, aggression, dominance, pride, women carry shadows too. But these shadows wear different faces. They're often more elusive, more socially acceptable, and far harder to spot. Jung named this dark aspect, the dark anima, when it shows up in a man's psyche, and the dark feminine when it appears in the world outside. It's the part of the feminine that seduces not from love, but from a need for control. It nurtures not to heal, but to bind. It appears gentle but hides contempt beneath the surface. This shadow never shouts. Instead, it whispers, hiding within charm, sweetness, and vulnerability, because that's where its power lies. Society has long trained women to avoid overt displays of anger, dominance, or aggression. But when these traits are repressed, they don't disappear. They go underground. And what goes underground becomes shadow. Jung warned that when women can't acknowledge their own envy, rage, or hunger for control, these feelings twist and resurface in more covert ways. Not through open violence, but through psychological games, emotional manipulation, passive-aggressive moves, withholding love, and exploiting the projections cast upon them. This is the dark side of charm. When it's no longer a bridge for connection, but a tool for control. When attention becomes currency. When affection becomes a weapon. When innocence turns into a mask for power plays. We see this dynamic echoed in myths and stories across cultures. The siren who lures sailors to their doom, the femme fatale, who destroys with a single kiss, the mother who smothers instead of nurtures. These aren't just fictional characters, they are expressions of the unconscious feminine shadow. The most unsettling truth: many women aren't fully aware when they're acting from this shadow place. Because the shadow, by nature, is unconscious. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like instinct, survival, even care. This hidden power isn't about evil intent. It's a psychological undercurrent rooted deep in human history and social conditioning. It's why some women instinctively use charm and vulnerability as shields, and why others unconsciously engage in subtle control to protect themselves. Understanding this dark feminine shadow isn't about judgment, it's about awareness. It's about seeing beyond surface appearances and recognizing the complex dance of light and shadow within all of us. And only when we confront these shadows, our own and those we project onto others, can we begin to build relationships that aren't tangled in illusions, but grounded in truth. In the end, Jung's message is clear: wholeness comes not from denying our shadows, but from integrating them. Because only by embracing the full spectrum of human nature, light and dark, innocence and shadow, can we hope to find real connection, love, and freedom. Survival instinct takes center stage, doing whatever it takes to navigate a world that rewards appearance over authenticity. Jung, in his private notes, noticed women who seemed outwardly gentle and kind, yet carried an undeniable energy of emotional control. These women would quietly undermine others, twist situations to their favor, or create psychological dependencies, all while maintaining a facade of care and warmth. Jung didn't condemn them. He observed, he saw a recurring pattern and traced it back to repressed psychic energy, a shadow part of the feminine psyche that society often ignores or forbids expression. Modern psychology has caught up with some of these ideas under terms like covert narcissism, behaviors that appear passive or vulnerable on the surface, but are deeply manipulative underneath. False modesty, emotional withholding, playing the victim to gain power. These traits mirror Jung's concept of the feminine shadow. But Jung's insight went beyond labeling it as pathology. He framed these behaviors as symptoms of an unintegrated part of the psyche. For him, both women and men must confront their shadows, the rage, the impulse for control, the hunger for dominance, not to act out these impulses blindly, but to recognize and integrate them consciously. Because when these darker traits are ignored or denied, they act from the shadows, twisting relationships and fueling cycles of emotional turmoil. What does this mean in everyday life? It means charm isn't always innocent. Behind a soft smile, there can be a storm of silent resentment. Some women learn to control not with aggression, but through silence, neediness, or seduction. And some men fall for this not out of weakness, but because they are caught in the spell of projection, enchanted by an image rather than reality. More importantly, understanding this dynamic isn't about assigning blame, it's about gaining awareness. When we shine light on the shadow, it loses its hold. A woman who owns her power doesn't need to cloak it behind performance or manipulation. A man who sees through the illusion can finally connect with a woman as she truly is, not as a fantasy or projection. Jung's warning wasn't aimed only at women. It applied to what happens when any part of the psyche, especially those parts society pressures us to suppress, is denied expression. When repressed, these energies fester and rot, only to rise again masked in charm and innocence. But driven by unconscious motives, the dark feminine isn't a myth. It's a psychological reality reflected in modern culture, social dynamics, and countless broken relationships. Yet Jung never framed it as evil. To him it was unfinished, a vital part of the psyche that needed to be acknowledged, felt, owned and transformed. Only through this process can the feminine within every person become whole. Jung's ideas emerged when psychology was still young, but some of his truths remain timeless. As society evolves, the shadows he once saw in private sessions now echo loudly in our public world. The whisper of the feminine shadow has become a roar, expressed through media, social interactions, and the digital personas we all craft. Today, we live in an age obsessed with appearances, carefully curated identities, filtered images, and masks worn for validation. In Jungian terms, this is the era of the hyper-persona, where survival often depends on maintaining illusions, hiding shadows behind perfection. Understanding this isn't just psychological insight, it's a call to awareness, because beneath every crafted mask, every charming smile, lies a shadow waiting to be seen. And only by facing it head-on, can we hope to live with honesty, depth, and true connection. Who you appear to be has overtaken who you truly are. This conflict is glaringly obvious in the way modern female archetypes dominate pop culture. From influencers to dating apps to reality TV stars, we constantly see women who project kindness, softness, or emotional vulnerability, but behind these facades lies a finely tuned sense of social control. The pick-me girl, the emotionally distant seductress, the perpetual victim, each embodies a form of subtle domination cleverly disguised as vulnerability. Jung would argue that the feminine shadow has simply evolved for the digital age. In romantic relationships, this shadow manifests sharply. Emotional manipulation doesn't always take the form of outbursts or overt abuse. More often, it's the calculated silence, the tearful breakdown right after being confronted, or the skillful shifting of blame under the cover of being too sensitive. These are clear warning signs Jung would have recognized immediately, expressions of the unconscious shadow moving quietly beneath the surface. Men, especially those unaware of their own inner projections, frequently fall into this trap. Jung warned that a man who hasn't integrated his own shadow will inevitably project an idealized feminine image onto the women he meets. He'll think he's found the one, failing to see that he's actually fallen for a reflection of his own unconscious desires. This disconnect explains why so many modern relationships collapse under the weight of impossible expectations. He wants a muse. She wants control. He craves connection. She seeks validation. Both are acting out scripts written by their unconscious shadows, and neither truly sees the other. Social media only intensifies this confusion. Platforms thrive on attention, rewarding performative vulnerability and seductive personas. In Jung's language, this is the inflated feminine mask, a false self that gains strength from likes, comments, and the illusion of intimacy. But beneath this carefully crafted mask often lies emptiness, insecurity, and unacknowledged rage. This phenomenon goes beyond individual psychology. It's cultural. We've built a society that rewards manipulation so long as it's wrapped in charm and vulnerability. We praise the woman who gets what she wants through emotional appeal, while ignoring the subtle coercion, the weaponized softness, and the carefully selective helplessness. We deny the fact that not all harm looks like violence or anger. Sometimes it wears perfume and sheds tears. Jung believed that what remains unconscious will inevitably dictate our fate, and that's exactly what we're witnessing. Women who refuse to confront their own shadow become trapped in toxic relationships filled with confusion, bitterness, and emotional destruction, yet they don't understand why. Men, seduced by projection, become disillusioned and resentful, feeling betrayed but unable to pinpoint the source of their pain. This dynamic isn't limited to romantic relationships. It appears at work, where a colleague cloaks sabotage and innocence. It plays out in politics, where image often trumps truth. It shows up in media, where victimhood is currency. The shadow feminine isn't some rare psychological curiosity. It's a hidden engine, driving many social interactions and conflicts. But there is hope. Jung's answer wasn't to suppress or demonize the shadow, but to integrate it, to face it honestly, and ask, what am I hiding? What power do I fear claiming? Which emotions am I denying? For women, this means embracing the parts of themselves that hunger for power, control, and recognition, not as flaws, but as essential pieces of a whole psyche. For men, it means recognizing their projections and learning to see women as complex, real people, not as symbols or ideals. Only through this conscious reckoning can we break free from the endless cycle of illusion and disappointment. The shadow doesn't have to be a curse. It can become a wellspring of strength and authenticity. Jung taught us that wholeness comes not from denial, but from acceptance, learning to live with all parts of ourselves, light and dark alike. In a world obsessed with appearances and masks, this lesson is more urgent than ever. Because beneath every carefully curated persona lies a shadow waiting to be embraced, and only then can true connection begin. Owning the parts of themselves that feel too fierce, too ambitious, too unfeminine means rejecting the myth that power only comes through innocence. It means stepping into genuine strength, rather than hiding behind subtle manipulation. For men, it means learning to see women clearly, not as flawless ideals or dangerous villains, but as whole, complex human beings. It means confronting their own inner shadows so they aren't blind to projection. It's about cultivating true discernment instead of blind worship. Modern society pushes us to perfect the mask. Jung, however, urged us to tear it down. And if his teachings have never felt more urgent, it's because the shadow has never been more visible, not in monstrous forms, but in the faces we casually scroll past every day. Carl Jung wasn't afraid of darkness. His life's work was an exploration into the deepest recesses of the human psyche, archetypes, shadows, traumas, dreams, yet, even he remained silent on some truths. Why? Because those truths were too volatile, too explosive for the cultural landscape of his time. When Jung studied the feminine psyche, he uncovered something deeply unsettling. Beneath the mask of innocence often lurks a shadowy power, a subtle but potent force of manipulation that distorts reality itself. To say this out loud, to publish it as theory, would have sparked fierce backlash. The early 20th century was hardly a safe space for psychological nuance, especially regarding gender. Women were still fighting for basic rights, the vote, equality, recognition beyond home and hearth. To suggest that female nature might harbor a manipulative undercurrent wasn't just controversial, it was seen as regressive, even cruel. Jung knew this well. He was not just a psychologist but a public figure, acutely aware of how ideas could be twisted or weaponized. Revealing his private insights about the female shadow risked not only his reputation but the acceptance of his broader theories. More importantly, Jung understood the collective psyche. Some truths can only be revealed when a society is ready to receive them without distortion, and that society, at that time, was not ready. Imagine unveiling the idea that femininity, when repressed or distorted, can manifest as covert domination, emotional manipulation, and social unrest. When women were still silenced globally, such a revelation would have been cultural suicide. Even today, this topic remains taboo. Critiquing feminine behavior is often conflated with attacking women themselves. While toxic masculinity and patriarchal shadows are discussed openly, the dark feminine is met with silence. Why? Because the myth of feminine innocence still reigns supreme. The cultural narrative clings to the woman as nurturer, victim or muse, but never as predator or destroyer. Jung's notes threaten that carefully guarded story. That's why they stayed hidden for so long. But here's the truth we can no longer ignore: every psyche carries a shadow, masculine or feminine. The dark feminine isn't a villain invented to shame women. It's an unacknowledged force within us all, waiting to be seen and integrated. To embrace this means to stop fearing power or ambition in women. It means recognizing that true strength is messy and complex, not wrapped in delicate ribbons or soft smiles. For men, it means shedding illusions and meeting women as equals, free from projection. Only by facing these shadows head-on can we break cycles of misunderstanding and pain. Only then can the feminine in all her facets be truly free and truly whole. Jung's message was radical for his time, but echoes louder than ever today. In a world obsessed with appearances and curated personas, the courage to confront our inner darkness is the path to genuine connection and healing. The masks will fall, and when they do, we will finally see each other, shadows and all. The deepest truths often stay private, hidden in the corners of the mind. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what if becoming your true self means facing truths that unsettle the world? Jung chose a delicate path. He whispered these truths in letters, hinted at them in dreams, and buried them in symbols. He protected his larger mission, understanding the human soul by avoiding a fire the world was not yet ready to confront. Now, decades later, that fire is flickering once more. We live in an era where manipulation wears the mask of softness, where personas are crafted for influence, and victimhood becomes a weapon of power. Jung's silence is no longer an option. Today, more than ever, we must have the courage to face these forbidden truths, not to shame, not to divide, but to understand. And with understanding comes clarity. So, what does this mean for you? It means that the most dangerous illusions are often the ones wrapped in charm, beauty, and gentle smiles. Jung's insights weren't a condemnation of women or anyone else. They were a warning for all of us. When we fail to recognize the full spectrum of human nature, light and shadow, we become vulnerable to manipulation, projection, and silent destruction. You don't need a degree in psychology to see this playing out. You've likely experienced it: the friend who always plays the victim but subtly controls the group. The partner who never raises their voice yet somehow makes you feel guilty. The influencer whose seemingly harmless persona shifts opinions and behaviors with deadly precision. These aren't coincidences. These are shadows Jung sought to illuminate. But here's the crucial point: this video isn't about them. It's about you. It's about recognizing when you're being pulled into someone else's story, when you're caught up in a mask, and learning to see through it not with judgment, but with clarity. Because clarity is power. When you become aware of projection, of the shadow lurking behind the smile, you gain something rare: discernment. You stop reacting on autopilot. You begin to spot truth where others see only performance. This is the path Jung called individuation, the true purpose of life. It means integrating your conscious mind with your unconscious, freeing yourself from illusions, whether your own or those imposed by others. This journey isn't about fear. It's about freedom, the freedom to trust your instincts, to question appearances, and to understand that innocence can sometimes be a strategy, not a genuine state of being. Perhaps most powerfully, it's the freedom to look in the mirror and ask yourself, where am I wearing a mask? Where am I projecting what I want to see instead of facing reality? Because when you peel away the masks from yourself and from others, you don't find ugliness. You find reality. And reality, as uncomfortable as it can be, is where true growth begins. It's messy, raw, and unfiltered. But it's the soil where authenticity takes root. Jung's legacy challenges us to move beyond illusions and to embrace the full complexity of our nature, to see the shadow as part of the whole, not as an enemy to be feared or denied. It's about stepping into a world where softness doesn't hide manipulation, where charm doesn't mask control, and where the light of awareness dispels the shadows of deception. The privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are, and that means courageously facing the shadows, both in others and within yourself. Because only through that fearless confrontation can you find clarity, freedom, and ultimately, wholeness. Here's the truth you need to hold on to. Reality might be disguised, it might sting, but it is never the enemy. The true adversary is the lie disguised as protection that keeps you in the dark, blind to what's really going on beneath the surface. If this video sparked something inside you, if it opened your eyes to the hidden layers beneath everyday interactions, then consider subscribing. Here, we dive deep into the psychology behind the masks we wear, the unseen forces that quietly shape our thoughts, our emotions, and the lives we lead. Take a moment to drop a comment below. Which part of Jung's insights resonated with you the most? What truth challenged you, or made you see things differently? Remember, awareness is not just knowledge, it's the first step toward freedom. And freedom begins when you stop accepting illusions and start seeing the world and yourself clearly.